Picking technique. Yes, we're at it again, because you guys and girls on Patreon voted for the topic of string transitions with fast alternate picking. Let's admit it, string transitions are pretty much our worst enemy when it comes to playing fast on the guitar. Sure, once you have the fundamentals of alternate picking down, you can usually play fast on one string. But only the most skilled players can use any picking pattern they want at any speed they desire. And that's exactly what you will be able to do after watching today's video until the end. This video is all about switching between different picking angles effectively, and this skill will allow you to conquer even the hardest scale patterns imaginable. So aside from the common picking technique factors we discussed in October, the picking angle itself plays a huge role in all of this. And chances are you're currently using the wrong picking angles for your licks, and that makes it impossible for you to speed them up any further. And to hopefully make this video even more awesome for you, I will also show you how I program my own speed picking backing tracks a bit later, so that practicing actually becomes fun and musical. So before you practice switching between different picking angles for very complicated licks, you should actually be familiar with the main two picking angles first. So thankfully there are only two of them that you need to learn about today. And to start things off, I prepared two killer licks for you that serve as awesome practical examples and exercises. Here's lick number 1 from my song The Kindling, taken off my recently released album Elevation. So this E Phrygian dominant lick is the perfect introduction to picking angle number 1. You need this one whenever you perform an even amount of strokes with ascending licks, like playing patterns of 2, 4, 6 or 8, before you're transitioning to the next higher string. So in this case you're playing 4 notes, then you're ending your pattern with an upstroke, and then you move to a downstroke on the next string. And for fluid and effective string transitions, you obviously want to make sure that your pick isn't getting stuck in that space between the strings. I'm using a big wide pick in this video so that you can hopefully see the angles. With the first example I want to avoid using an angle like this, because after playing 4 notes I'm stuck between the E and A string right now, and I would have to jump over the A string to play the next 4 strokes on the D string. But when I switch my angle to that kind of position, I can play 4 strokes. Now my pick is in the air and I can play the next 4 strokes and the next 4 strokes, as opposed to actually having to jump over the strings to play on the next string, or actually grazing the other strings. So in order to really internalize those string transitions in my practice routine and to practice playing tight on the grid, I love to program backing tracks for myself in Cubase, and as you can see I'm using the EZdrummer for this one once again. You might remember it from last week. So with the backing track for the first exercise you can see the groups of 16th notes right here. And I'm always accenting the string changes, so the first note of each group of 4, right here this would be the A string, the D string, G string and B string. And by playing to this rhythmic and dynamic pattern, I can make sure to sync up every picking stroke with every hi-hat stroke. That makes it much easier and actually quite fun for me to develop good note spacing. That means I want to make sure that I'm playing the exact same note values with every single stroke. So obviously each 16th note should be equally long and it shouldn't look like that. But as obvious as this looks and sounds, a lot of players, especially in rock and metal, don't have good note spacing. And that's one of the big reasons why you might think your playing isn't exactly clean or it doesn't sound professional yet. Let's listen to the full take with the backing track real quick. So you can clearly hear those louder hi-hat accents on the first note of each string. So I can't recommend enough to work with those dynamics and accents in your backing tracks. The second lick suddenly gets much easier by using the opposite angle for ascending lines. Check it out. So this is a speed picking building block and phrase that I like to use quite often. And if you paid very close attention, you could spot the uneven groups of 3 and 6 on each string. That means I'm ending on a downstroke on each string, and I have to use the other angle to get to the upstroke on the next string without causing any unwanted noise. So here's a direct comparison between the two angles. You can see the angle I use for even ascending licks to the left, and the one for uneven ascending licks is featured on the right. So with the left one, I'm finishing with an upstroke on the lower string, and with the right one, my last stroke on the lower string is a downstroke. So once again, I want to make practicing this more fun, musical and productive, so I'm working with a drum backing track. The same principle we discussed before, but now we have more interesting groups. So I'm starting out with a group of 3 right here. Then I have my first string change right here, a group of 6, then another group of 6, a group of 3, and then I have my final note right here. This is how it sounds like. So once again, you can clearly hear those louder hi-hat strokes. And the main reason and secret why this is so effective is because you can't really think about every single note anymore that you're playing at these speeds. So I personally try to set those anchor points in the lick. Those are the notes and the rhythmic accents that I really pay attention to. And when those are perfectly in time, all the other notes fall into place as well, most of the time. Unsurprisingly, those are the string changes with this lick. So by accenting this with my backing track, I can make sure my note spacing is on point, so I always focus on those notes where you can hear the accent with the hi-hat. And when those are tight and on the grid, the notes in between should be placed and spaced correctly as well. Of course, you can download these awesome sounding backing tracks, also the guitar profiles, the PDF tabs, and some really awesome video play-alongs that I recorded especially for you on patreon.com/Bernd. Of course, that's where I always upload these killer practice files for the weekly videos. And obviously, I'm also practicing with these files myself. So joining our awesome community over there today will help you out a lot with making much faster progress with all of this. So far so good. You might actually be familiar with those two picking angles by now if you're subscribed to the channel. But here's the big dilemma. Of course, music isn't always that mathematical with those even and uneven patterns. And you obviously need to be able to play more creative lines by mixing and matching those different patterns in any way you like. That's exactly what separates the professional from the intermediate players when they're improvising and writing guitar solos. Of course, you will sound absolutely awesome and free when you're improvising, and you can play pretty much anything you want with alternate picking. And the first very important step to getting there is focusing on patterns that force you to switch between those two picking angles. Here's one of my personal favorites right away. So this is the final alternate picking run of the first guitar solo from my single Dopamine. This one is really cool and it sounds quite interesting because I'm alternating between different groups right here. Of course, it's still a repeating theme and pattern to make it somewhat catchy, but I think it sounds much cooler and more creative than just taking the scale and playing it up or down. Let's dive into the transcription together to see what's actually happening here. So I'm using angle number 2 because of the uneven groups of 3 and 6 at the beginning. As you can see, I'm ending with a downstroke on each string at first. Then we have a group of 5 and a group of 2, but I'm actually descending now. So I'm playing on a higher string and then I move back to a lower string. And you guessed it, that's when I need to switch to angle number 1 in order to make this transition. So my transition between the different picking angles usually happens in this area, so I have 5 notes until I have to make the switch. That's exactly why this lick is perfect for starting out with those picking angle changes. You do at least have a bit of time to get adjusted to the transition. Let's check out a picking technique close-up shot now so that you can see how this works with different tempos. So this is how it looks like with mid tempos, with the big white pick. You can clearly see the transitions between the two angles. Alright, now let's slow it down. At this tempo you can clearly see the changes in between the two angles and how this really helps me out with not touching the other strings and with not getting stuck in between the strings. So the next backing track that I made for myself and also for you as well on Patreon is a bit more musical and practical because it's great and very helpful to work with those dynamic accents. But at one point you actually want to use this for your music as well, and you can't always tell your drummer to accent every single lick that you're playing like this. So to change things up a bit, I was working with a beat right here, a pretty simple but nice sounding beat. So as you can hear, it's still hitting the most important accents in the lick, but I'm on my own now when it comes to the 16th notes and to the note spacing. And that's also a great and a bit more musical way of practicing this as soon as you feel more comfortable about your picking skills and transitions. When I'm making these backing tracks, I'm also using the easy bass right now that you might also remember from last week. Really simple bass line. And the main reason why I love to work with MIDI drums and bass for my backing tracks is because I can always just easily change the tempo if I need a slower or faster version of my backing track, like that for example. so that's half the speed, and I don't need to record a new bass track or a new drum track. Since those are just MIDI files, I can change the tempo in Cubase as much as I want, and that's obviously awesome when you're working on something very difficult. In this case, you can start very slow to familiarize yourself with the picking angle changes. You can export a mid-tempo backing track at your comfort zone and a very fast one to push yourself. Alright, let's look at one final and really challenging lick. This little and quite challenging run finishes off the second guitar solo of my song Dopamine. So this one is actually quite simple in its structure at least. The only thing that stands out rhythmically is that I'm playing groups of 3, but I'm not playing triplets here. So instead of playing my usual groups of 4 with 16th notes, I'm grouping 3 16th notes together, and the result is a really cool syncopated feel with the lick. The trickiest thing about this one is that you don't exactly have a lot of time to reposition your pick, since you're constantly switching between those two different picking angles. As you can see, you're ending with a downstroke on the higher string, so you have to use angle number 2, but the last note is an upstroke, so you need angle number 1 for that. And what makes this one so challenging is that you only have 3 notes until the new picking angle needs to be in place. So let's check out some picking technique close-up shots once again, so that you can see how this looks like in detail with different speeds. So with the mid-tempo footage, you can see that the transitions are getting smaller because I have to switch so fast. And when we slow it down a bit more, you can see that the changes with the picking angle mostly occur after the last note on each string. So for today's final lick and backing track, I did something a bit different. In case you're still struggling a bit with getting your alternate picking notes and string transitions tight on the grid, you can also experiment with double bass backing tracks. So those accents aren't exactly subtle anymore. Let's check that one out at a slower tempo. So those are some really loud double bass strokes. And when you're practicing to a track like this, you can really focus on sticking to that double bass pattern, so 1 stroke for every single kick. That has helped me immensely with playing tighter and on the grid with rhythm guitar. So I'm also experimenting with this when it comes to lead guitar, especially with those long 16th note or 16th note triplet runs. Of course, you want an awesome metal drum kit and sound in order to do this. And since last week's recording course on Patreon and since the last YouTube episode, I like to work with the modern metal expansion. The Driven preset is pretty cool in my opinion. Those are some really fat and heavy double bass accents, and it's quite easy for me to focus on them when I'm practicing. You can't really miss that. So that's a lot of information, and I'm guessing your question right now is, where do I actually start with all of this? My personal suggestion is familiarizing yourself with the 2 picking angles first before you attempt to switch between them in a fast and fluid way. You really need to be able to feel the difference, and in my personal opinion, you need to master both of them since they feel a bit different. The first 2 licks we discussed today serve as perfect and simple exercises for that. Of course, I also really suggest getting your practice files for all the exercises on Patreon to get a head start with all of this. And after you feel confident about using the 2 angles individually, and after you understand when to actually use each angle, you can slowly start to combine them. You could play exercise number 1 followed by a short break and then exercise 2, for example, so that you don't have to switch in between the lick right away. That's another practice file I made for you on Patreon. But after doing all that, there's really no way around it. You have to start working on licks that force you to switch between different angles constantly. And that's obviously what exercises 3 and 4 are all about. So following this practice roadmap will get you familiar with the fundamentals in a very short amount of time. And I'm actually quite sure that you will notice a pretty big difference with your picking technique after just a couple of weeks of working on this. But this fundamental video was actually just part 1 of the string transition series. So if you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe right now so that you don't miss the next episode. As you could see in the beginning, it's a very popular topic on the Patreon video votings. So the next video on that is probably already around the corner. Thanks so much for staying until the end. Of course, as always, your reward for that is today's random or not so random German word, Saite. That actually means string, so guitar string. Make sure to comment that one below. As you know by now, this really confuses everybody who's not familiar with the random German word at the end. I will hopefully see you again very soon. Until then, have a lot of fun shredding. Great news, my friends, I'm finally on Spotify to provide you with some awesome guitar music and shredding. You can already listen to my first full-length album, Elevation. And there's plenty more exciting music in the making for you right now. So make sure to follow me on Spotify today. The link is in the description, or you can just search for my name.